I'm Kostis from Dalamara Winery. I am the sixth generation in the winery, working on winemaking and growing vineyards. I'm now in the head of the winery for till 2011. I took over the winery, the wine production, and then slowly all the rest, together with my wife the last 2 years, Maria. And we produce 35 to 40,000 bottles. 80% of that is Xinomavro. This is our most important variety at the moment. And then we also grow Assyrtiko, Pereknadi, and Merlot. We're organic since 1996, and in generally we have a, let's say, green approach. So we do our own composts. We have a small farm with animals. We work 100% on solar energy, and in generally we try to be a winery that will be less dependent on outside sources. The winery on its form of today, so producing bottled wines, started in 1991. It started by my father and my mother. But before that, my grandfather and my great-grandfathers, they were all making wine, selling bulk and selling from their wine shop inside the town of Naoussa. And as far as we know, depending on the documents that we have, we can count almost 6 generations. So the oldest document is in 1840. It's the proof of buying a vineyard back then. And then we started to get more vineyards, but we remained small to medium-sized winery till today that we have 7 hectares. When I took over, we had more clear ideas about what we want to do. So the object today is to make high-quality wines from Xinomavro mostly, and then also a few other wines with the rest of the varieties. So from this year and on, we have 80% of Xinomavro in the vineyards, almost 20% more than what we used to have. We have around 10% Assyrtiko, 5% Pereknadi, which is a local variety, and we will start working on that more than we used to do before, and 5% of Merlot. And it's before that we also had Roditis, Malagousia, Negoska, and Senso, and some other varieties with local names. And it was planted the old way, so mixed with each other, even in the same line. So that was also one of the reasons that we turned into less varieties. We want to have a message more clear to the people, and we want to make our work more precise. In the way that we work in our winery, all the wines are different in every vintage, and this is something that is our goal, is to show the different characteristics of every variety. We want this to be I don't know the word for that, to be to see the footprint of the vintage in our wines. And it is because we want to work with the first material with less interventions as possible. And especially Xinomavro is a variety that is affected a lot by the different climate conditions. So we don't want to try to make the same wine every year. We don't want to cook our wines. We want to get the best from the grape that we have in our hands, just to drive the grape to be the wine that it looks that will fit the best for it. If a vintage is more rainy, then you'll get a more elegant wine with more freshness and better acidity probably. If a vintage is warmer, you'll get a more full-bodied wine with more tannic structure and richer aromas and so on. Talking about the history of the region, we have very old references. There is a reference in a book called In the Footpaths of Jesus. It's made by National Geographic, and it mentions this area like the area where the Roman emperors were buying their wines. But the first written reference about that mentions Naoussa itself is in 1727 in a geography book, saying that Naoussa is famous for its wines and for its wine exports. And later, in the beginning of the 19th century, we have two different cases, two French, that talk about the wines of Naoussa. The one is a French traveler and writer, and he says that Naoussa makes the best wine in the Ottoman Empire back then. And the other says that Naoussa has the most expensive, exports its wines in France, and always get at least twice the price than any other wine of the Ottoman Empire. And later, Naoussa get even more recognition, and almost all the area around Naoussa were covered by vineyards. They were, especially when the French had the phylloxera that attacked the vineyards, then they had to buy wines from all around the Mediterranean to cover the gap between consumption and production. And Naoussa had to protect its reputation. So Naoussa made one of the first appellations of origin, like kind of. They had a document that were going together with the wines that it was the proof that the wines are really from Naoussa. And then they made this label, this proof, in 7 different languages till 1928, when the Naoussa vineyard were destroyed by phylloxera as well. And so only 5% of the vineyard left. And slowly then the French came here in the region to teach people how to plant the grafted vines. They also brought the variety Cinsault. And so for a while, Naoussa were made by Xenover and Cinsault. In 1970, then the Greek Institute of Wine changed all that, and they say that Naoussa wines will officially have the appellation as the European system of appellations, and the Naoussa wines will always be made by 100% Xenover. That till the moment were called Black of Naoussa. And still today, the official name is Black of Naoussa, and then Xenover is one of the synonyms. That, for a reason, is the most commonly used. So then, after that, in the 70s, they started to plant more vineyards again. Of course, they never reached the point that they had before, because in the 30s, when they started to graft the vineyards, they had already brought some agronomists from Italy to teach to the farmers here how to grow orchards. So that's why we still today we have a lot of peaches, pears, apricots, and many other fruits, and there's not as much place for wine as they used to have. But still today there are many parts planted with wine. There are a lot of wineries. At least 20 wineries are making the Naoussa appellation wine. And it was in the beginning of the 90s that they made the um, the professional association of vine growers and winemakers, and they started to make some seminars. They started to give some motivation to wine producers to make bottled wine, because the region were producing a lot of wines, but not a lot of protected appellation of origin wines. So in the beginning of 90s, many producers of bulk wine, also my grandfather and my parents, they turned from bulk wine to bottled wine. And this is how more or less we arrived to today's Naoussa wines. Our philosophy in winemaking is that we put our hands on as much as we can when it's still on the field. When it arrives to the winery, we put our hands as less as we can. So minimum intervention, we try to follow, to have a very good grape in the beginning, and then everything will come very easily. And this is something that changed the last 10 years for us, because it also comes to the same moment that I returned to the winery, and we found out that the best way to do a wine is just to leave it by its own and take its way. Of course, we're not radical on that. We don't say, okay, we'll do it the old way, we'll leave the wine there and we'll go on vacations and we'll see what will happen when we're back. We try to be as good as we can on the technical part, but only if it is really necessary we will make an intervention. We want our wines to be clean, to be correct. And what means to be correct? Wine, that's a big question, but we try to make the best with less innovation. I think this is the main idea and the main philosophy of what we do. On life, I think it's not far from the winemaking. I keep it simple. It's what I like. I think I'm an easy person trying to, enjoy life by simple parts. I love the mountain here in Naoussa. I can be here every afternoon. I will never be bored, and just without anything I can walk out by my door and find 100 different things to do, and without any equipment, without anything in my hands. And I think this can give you an idea about what I like to do. In Naoussa we have this stone that looks a bit spongy. It's the travertine. So it's limestone. It's made by sediment that came here many years ago, that covered vegetation actually many years ago, and then as it is formed while the vegetation were decomposed, it created a lot of holes. That means that no matter if the soil is heavy or light, you have a subsoil, and that gets a lot of aeration and dries out correctly and quickly. And this is very important. On the other hand, sometimes this, and if you have a light soil as well, as it is the case in Palio-Callas, you have to be careful with that because it can rinse out everything. So, but we are lucky with that because being organic, you have some vegetation in your ground, and this can keep all the important things to the soil. And it looks like it works very well with Xenomavro, because we know that the best parts for Xenomavro in this region are planted in places that this is very intense, that you clearly have travertine. What do I do in my free time or in?
Yeah.
Oh, many things. I travel. I As I mentioned before, I do a lot of things in the mountain, so ski, biking, gathering wild mushrooms, hiking, and I like the sea as well, go there and swim, or swim to the rivers and spend time with friends, drink a glass of wine or two maybe. When I first arrived here, it was a big thing to change all the become cut off the adding of yeast, cut off many things that they were used in the winemaking. Probably the biggest one was to make the split between Naoussa and Palhocalhas. It was hard to make. We already had something, a wine label that was recognizable in a standard price level for many years, and then in 1 year we changed this. We put another wine to his place, and this wine changes completely. It goes more than twice the price than the wine that we had before, and we have to prove that the quality is there as well, and it really was 2 times more the job that we have done. This was really important. There are few wineries, like 2 or 3, that they work more or less the same way as we do. Then I think a lot of wineries work in a very interventive way. So they try to, all of us, all of the wineries here, they try to handle the tannins, because this is the big thing in Xenomavro. You have tannins, so you have to. These tannins can be dry, and can be something probably negative for a lot of wine consumers. But at the same time, the same tannins can make a great wine, a wine that will have a great potential to age, a wine that will match some very special lunches, and then the difference is on the way that we try to handle this. There are wineries that they are very interventive on that. There are wineries that they work as we do. There are wineries that they do it on the classic way, the recipe, as also my parents used to do this, working on a recipe. I mean, not really a recipe, but on a standard way. So, in the beginning of the 90s, I mentioned already when we were talking about history that a lot of seminars were held here by the Professional Association of Wine Growers and Winemakers, and they had to teach them how to do the wine. So they believed that the best will be to ferment the wine to stainless steel tank, ferment the wine, macerate the wine, make the extraction as long as the wine were fermenting, and then put the wine for 1 year to 225 liter barrels. And this was more or less what everybody were doing. So the last 10 years, many wineries, they started to change this, and we have the different philosophies around winemaking in Naoussa. We remain a family business, so it's mostly like me and Maria, my wife. We're in the head of the winery. My father is still helping us, doing stuff mostly in the vineyard. And then we have 2 workers. One is my cousin. He also has a vineyard in Palhocalhas as well, and 1 worker that is here for more than 20 years. And then of course we get some people in for harvest, usually 1 or 2 more persons. But in generally it remains a family business. We export our wines in more than 13 countries, and exports are 2/3 of our sales in wine, especially Xenomavro. This is our strong point, and it works very well abroad.